Okay, so today we're going to be talking about this executive order that was signed 2 days ago. It's called the Prevent Online Censorship Executive Order. And it was on May 28th after Trump tweeted out about mail in voting, and Twitter decided to put a little link about the facts of mail in voting beneath it. Now, the tweet that Trump tweeted out read, "There is no way, zero, that mail in ballots will be anything less than substantially fraudulent. Mailboxes will be robbed, ballots will be forged, and even illegally printed and fraudulently signed. The governor of California is sending ballots to millions of people, anyone." Now, this is true. Even when the mainstream media covers mail in voting, they talk about the likelihood of fraud being very possible, but also very low. But they talk about how it's easily possible, I think is the best way to word it. If someone can intercept or fake or print more ballots, and they just assume that there's enough checks and balances for it to not happen. Just like there's enough checks and balances for Obama to not be able to illegally spy on the Trump campaign without immediately getting caught or blocked, right? The point is, when something is prone to fraud and there's power at stake, the person who's vying for the power will push as much as they can to get that fraud to help their cause. And we see this in numerous instances, in politics especially. But I'm not here to go down those roads or talk about the travesty of mail-in voting. I mean, apparently people can riot and go to the grocery store, but they can't vote in person. And that's how you know that something funky is up. But regardless, this executive order. So in the second paragraph of this executive order, it says, when large, powerful social media companies censor opinions with which they disagree, they exercise a dangerous power. They cease functioning as passive bulletin boards and ought to be viewed and treated as content creators. Now, the executive order compares online platforms to the public square. They call them the public square of the 21st century, specifically calling them platforms and modern communications technology. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube wield the power to control the perception of public events. They can censor, delete, and disappear information. They can control what people see and what they don't. Now, we see this all the time on YouTube and on Twitter, and there are plenty of leftists who have been censored. Don't get me wrong. This isn't strictly a conservative thing. Maybe it impacts conservatives more, but it's not strictly a conservative issue. This is something that all of the platforms are engaging in. And just look at the right media channel. I mean, that alone has been heavily restricted. That's why I'm posting on this channel, because that channel is no longer viable on YouTube. People are not getting notifications. People are not able to see my content. My content is not getting publicized. It's not getting promoted. And I'm not a dangerous person. I'm not saying dangerous things. So the executive order continues on. Online platforms are engaging in selective censorship that is harming our national discourse. Tens of thousands of Americans have reported, among other troubling behaviors, online platforms flagging content as inappropriate, even though it does not violate any stated terms of service, making unannounced and unexplained changes to company policies that have the effect of disfavoring certain viewpoints, and deleting content and entire accounts with no warning, no rationale, and no recourse. Twitter now selectively decides to place a warning label on certain tweets in a manner that clearly reflects political bias. As has been reported, Twitter seems never to have placed such a label on another politician's tweet. As recently as last week, Representative Adam Schiff was continuing to mislead his followers by peddling the long disproved Russian collusion hoax, and Twitter did not flag those tweets. And I understand that can be divisive to say that, oh, well, the Russia hoax, it's clearly a hoax. But we've gone over this plenty of times. If you go over to the Right Media channel, there's a massive catalog of videos going through all of the evidence as to how the entire Russia hoax is, well, a hoax, how it's all fabricated, and how it's been so manipulated by the media that people do not question whether it's true or not. They're just accepting it as being true. And this is the problem with the media, is what they do. And you're seeing this with platforms also. And that's why I talk about this, or as we should be calling them, publishers. It's because they string together a web of lies that all play on one another. So all the lies seem to fit into a gigantic puzzle. And that's the narrative that they're going with. And so they craft this narrative. This is not something random. It's not like a bunch of random points in space where people don't know what they're talking about. It's like when people buy into the Russia narrative, they know what they're talking about. It makes sense to them. The problem is they just don't refine that enough. They don't go deep enough to figure out, hey, this entire hoax, this entire worldview that we're talking about here is wrong. So the executive order also talks about how Google developed the Dragonfly project, which is a search engine for the Chinese Communist Party that censors certain searches like human rights and Tiananmen Square, and it tracks users determined appropriate for surveillance. So Google is not caring at all about human rights. They're not caring about information, misinformation. They don't care about any of that. It's about money and power and politics. So other companies have accepted advertisements that spread misinformation about Chinese imprisonment of religious minorities, COVID-19, and the Hong Kong protests. And the idea here is that these tech platforms say they're open to free speech. They have very mild guidelines, but yet they restrict certain content that doesn't violate those guidelines, or they make the guidelines so vague that they can censor anything that they want. This is what YouTube did with saying, this is one example, saying that bullying isn't allowed. Now you have anything that hurts anyone's feelings falling into that category. It's how iDubbbz got one of his content cops removed. The issue is that these platforms have garnered an audience and power through the lie that they're an open free speech platform. And now they're leveraging that power to shape narratives to support their own agenda through deceptive, fraudulent, and pretextual actions. And even if you want to make the argument that it's not political, they're censoring leftists too. Like I just made that argument, but the point is that there's different degrees. I think that they're censoring conservatives way more than leftists, even though there are accounts of leftists being censored on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, etc. But the point is that it's not all equal, and it is deceptive, it's fraudulent, and you can go outside of the realm of politics like we think about it. They're favoring the Chinese Communist Party. They're favoring politicians who actively lie. They're favoring people who purposely distort the view of the masses. You know what we call them? Propagandists, okay? Now, something that's referenced several times in this executive order is Section 230C, which basically says that if an online platform restricted certain content, they'd be considered a publisher and not a platform. There's a clear provision made that allows platforms to block harmful content. And this was included for the specific act of protecting minors and allowing platforms to remove downright harmful information, harmful content. So let's be clear here. That's not what Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube are doing. They're adding more to their users' content, and they're censoring content that doesn't violate any guidelines and is not harmful to anyone unless the person is being emotionally harmed because they hate the information being spread. And even if it's not the truth, the issue that Trump is having is that these platforms have no problem pushing misinformation. They do have a problem supporting a certain side of the political spectrum or a certain narrative. They have a problem with that, regardless of whether or not it's true or false. So they don't care about harm. They care about politics and money. Now, the executive order states that it's the policy of the US to not allow the provision to take down harmful content to be distorted to protect platforms from removing content that goes far beyond the purview of good faith takedowns. So the purpose of that good faith clause was not to allow platforms to grow into behemoths while lying about their free speech characteristics so they could then censor information and be protected for it. Because that's really what's happening here. They're censoring information, not misinformation, not even just misinformation. And it's not harmful or degrading or threatening information, but rather political information. And keep in mind, harmful, degrading, and emotionally threatening information is still information. And I'm all in favor of these platforms being called publishers and being able to censor, delete, alter, add anything that they want. They won't survive very long. The issue is that they're lying to people. So they're drawing people in under deceptive and fraudulent means. Again, that's fine with me, but let's be very clear about what they're doing, okay? When I say that's fine with me, I mean it's fine to censor, delete, alter, add. That's fine with me, but let's be very clear about what they're doing. The executive order states that when a platform censors, deletes, alters, or adds anything that does not fit into that Section 230 I was talking about, they have engaged in what is called editorial conduct. So they should now be exposed to the standard liability that a traditional publisher adheres to. They're no longer an online platform or an online provider. So the executive order says within 60 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Commerce, in consultation with the Attorney General and acting through the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, shall file a petition for rulemaking with the FCC requesting that the FCC expeditiously propose regulations to clarify the circumstances under which a provider of an interactive computer service restricts access to content not protected under Section 230, which would make them clarify the difference between a publisher and a platform. And the FCC needs to clarify what a good faith restriction looks like, especially if the content restricted is deceptive or inconsistent with a provider's terms of service. Now, they're also reviewing how much the federal government spends on these platforms that claim to be free speech when they're really not. The reason is because people's tax dollars are going to them, but people aren't receiving equal opportunities on these platforms. Now, the Attorney General is also assembling a team to go after online platforms engaging in deceptive and unfair acts and practices. So I know that's a mouthful, but let's be clear here. This executive order is not about the fact that Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube are free market companies, but rather they're deceiving people into thinking that they're free speech platforms, and they're lying through their terms of service. They lay out the rules they rightfully set for what content is allowed on their platform, and then they go outside the purview of that, and it's generally for a political bias. The reason is because these platforms can't just say they're a political tool masquerading as a free speech platform. And I see this executive order as really the best of two options for these publishers, because it's either this executive order is signed or every individual with a legitimate complaint and proof of unjust censorship can sue these platforms. It doesn't mean that everyone will win, but people can sue them. So while I'm not in favor of the government using their hammer to regulate private companies, there's repercussions that these companies are going to face no matter what for deceiving people and really it boils down to taking market shares that are not theirs to take. So Trump is not saying that he wants to control these platforms, because I've heard that from people who are critical of this executive order. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that here soon, but he's not saying that he wants to control these platforms. That's what people opposed to this executive order are saying. And you know me, you know that I'm a free speech, free market guy, okay? But what Trump is saying is that these platforms either need to abide by the current regulations and stop deceiving people, or they need to be held to the same liabilities as publishers. And sure, okay, if someone tweets something false or defaming or slanderous, Twitter shouldn't be held responsible for that. But if Twitter attaches a fact check or something of the sort to a tweet, and there's even the smallest bit of misinformation in that fact check, we should be able to go after Twitter for those deceptive, defaming, and or slanderous practices. And just like if they censor something that doesn't fall outside of their guidelines, if it's something that their guidelines don't state that they can censor, then we should be able to go after these platforms or these publishers. So Section 230 uses the term otherwise objectionable, which is very malleable. So basically what they're talking about is these platforms. So a platform can continue to be considered a platform while still removing things considered to be otherwise objectionable. So that's clearly very malleable. And part of this executive order is getting the FCC to define those terms. So Trump also included several terms for the FCC to define that need to be defined so the public can have a clear view of these platforms or publishers, whatever they end up being. And this executive order also, one little issue is that it did not go through the standard interagency review process. The FCC didn't see the order or get consulted on it. And there's a large amount of legal and constitutional questions here. But again, the essence of the order is to try to get platforms to just be straightforward and honest. I mean, they're deceptive, and we see that every single day. Every single day, we see these platforms deceive people. And that's all that this executive order is saying, is that now people need to see what the reality is. People need, these platforms need to show people who they really are. And when it comes to something like spreading misinformation about COVID for the Chinese government, or accepting ad money to run ads that are deceptive or misleading, or just generally against human rights, they're against, I don't know, against any, whenever they're pushing a political agenda through advertisements or whatever, okay, people need to see it for what it is. And so people see these little fact checks and people think, oh, great, these platforms are fact checking things on their platform. But they're not thinking, oh, okay, so I saw this advertisement for the CCP. Or people aren't thinking, hey, I saw this tweet about the CCP and it didn't have a little fact check thing, so it must be true. The problem is that the standard is not set. That's what I see this executive order is doing. And if somebody thinks that I'm wrong, if you guys are reading this differently, feel free to let me know. I'm open to learning about this, okay? But I read through it. I've read several articles that talk about it from different angles and take very different stances on it. And this is the stance that I'm taking on it. This is the way that I'm viewing it. So I do not think that this executive order is as overbearing as some people are thinking that it is. And I also don't think that it's as well formulated and as well thought through as other people might be thinking it is. There are obviously some issues, and just the fact that there's so many vague terms being thrown around, that's an issue. But the executive order kind of deals with that. And one of the problems is that Trump is trying to push the FCC to define terms that are very difficult to define. And we're going to start to get a more clear definition of some of these things. And I just think that as we move forward from this executive order, and as we see things start to fall in place, we're going to start to see that these platforms, these publishers, whatever they're going to end up being called, are shown in a more true light. And I think that that's fine. So that's pretty much all for this live stream. I just wanted to get on here. I wanted to talk about this a bit and go through it and give you guys quotes from it and talk about the specific Section 230 that it talks about some potential pitfalls of Section 230, like I was talking about with one of the ways that they worded something. But I mean, it's just, this is something that's very easy to look. This is something that's very easy to look at with a certain bias. It's very easy to say, oh, we need an executive order for free speech. Oh, that's funny. Like, that's ironic. And it's like, well, they've been getting away with lying to people for a long time and taking market shares that are not theirs to take. They're taking people's focus, people's attention that is not rightfully theirs because they are being fraudulent. That is very important to understand. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to try to do another video. I don't know exactly on what, but hey, if you want a free speech platform, you want a place where you can go on and you can say whatever you want, shieldstrm.com. I'm going to put it in the comment section right now. Okay. People, you got to go over there. You have to sign up, and it's free to sign up. It's free to sign up. And I am active over there, even if I'm not posting a video. Okay. You got to go over there. You got to sign up. And we have a network right now of like 313 people. I think it's well over 300, and people are active every day, and we're forming a community over there. We're forming a network. It's free speech. Okay. I'm not restricting you beyond harmful content. And I don't mean emotionally harmful. I mean posting credit card information, doxing people, threatening people, posting CP, things like that. You know what I'm talking about. Things that are egregious. Like, there has to be some standard, because it can't just be people posting credit card information and trading, like weapons and stuff like that. That doesn't fly over there. But if you want to say anything political, you want to question anything, you want to use any kind of language, you want anything, go over there, sign up. It's fine. Okay. And you can post articles, you can comment on things. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And just listen to the testimonies of the people who have already signed up. They are really enjoying it. There are a lot of people enjoying the site, getting a lot out of it. We're forming, like, it's basically a family for this channel over there. And I love it. We have 313 people, and people are active all the time, every day. There's every single time I log on, there's somebody on the site. So you got to go over there and sign up. I promise you'll be getting notifications without a doubt. You will not be censored. Okay. That is the place to go if you're sick of YouTube and you still want notifications for my videos, because I post them all over there. And so you will get notified without fail. And there is an app for this that will send a notification right to your phone, or you can get it sent to your email. And I explained too on the website how to set up notifications. It's pretty easy, but for people who aren't tech savvy, I wrote up a whole thing on how to do this. So you can go over there and it's just, please go over there. It's beautiful, and it's really a breath of fresh air from everything that we're dealing with here on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. It's insane. So if you want a free speech platform that is like a networking community, that's the thing for you. shieldstrm.com. I put it in the comment section. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys sticking around, watching my content. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much, and I'll see you guys in the next one.